Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with your friends. Joining me today, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Now, you see, what I wanted to do
I hate you so much, Cameron. I hate you so much. Like, I know the lag is not that delayed between us. This is what I deal with every week, Christian. Also joining us, Frank Pisani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I like the little laugh we got from Cam there too. We got a little Salacious Crumb on top of the George Lucas impression.
There you go, yeah. And Logan Wilkinson, unable to join us this week, but we were able to bring in a ringer who was actually going to join us anyway, and we were going to have a fun 5-person show, but Logan ended up having to drop out. Welcome back to That Nerdy Site content here, Christian Puente, a.k.a. PixelBrave. How you doing, Christian?
You want to know the odds of this being an awesome show? It's high.
It's high. It's high. There you go. Nice. I appreciate the Rogue One callback, and in a very timely fashion, not like Cameron's super delayed introductions that drive me crazy every time because Cameron pushes my buttons. So for those that don't know Christian, Christian was a former contributor here at That Nerdy Site, working with us on a number of things. I don't think you've probably been on a That D Plus show since like the Brink episode that we recorded at PAX East last year, but we had you on that.
Great episode.
That was fun and indeed a great standout episode. And Christian used to host that anime pod for us before kind of departing to focus on some mental health stuff, as I recall, right, Christian, last year?
It's been a rough.
It was a pandemic. It was a pandemic. You kind of need to like get your stuff and no issues there. So I hope you're doing well. Always great to chat with you. Thank you for, as I said kind of before we started recording, thank you for being one of the people, really the only person I can like point to that reaches out to us and is like, hey, I'm only hearing Trevor's audio, so you guys might want to fix that in the podcast feeds. So which is exactly what happens. I accidentally upload my audio because I typically like name the episode, like I name my audio files just whatever the episode's going to be, and when I like pull all the files together, that's what goes in. So I have gotten to the habit of like naming the export whatever that episode is _edit. So I know that that's the one I want to upload, not whatever stupid file is just me talking. So thank you, Christian, for being an avid listener, listening to our Summer of Star Wars kind of all summer long, and of course your history working with us on the site as well. So yes, we are wrapping up our Summer of Star Wars today with the last little one-off we have here, Empire of Dreams, the story of the Star Wars trilogy, documentary about kind of the making of the original trilogy of Star Wars. Just kind of a nice, like, let's bring it full circle. Obviously, we went chronologically. This is the only one outside of the, like, Skywalker saga and then the standalones that didn't really fall in that chronological mix. And also, admittedly, it's not really, it's not in the movies section of Disney Plus. It's like one of the specials under the Star Wars bucket of stuff.
It was hard to find.
I had to like search for it.
Yeah, indeed. So why do we pick this? Of course, Summer of Star Wars, we're wrapping it up. This is the last of our saga, our multi-week saga here of Star Wars stuff that we started way back in, what was that, May, maybe at this point? When we started.
Yeah, we did it to start, we did it right after May 4th.
Yeah, so. That's right. Doing A New Hope all the way through to this one. A little bit of the history lesson on this one. This was originally released, had a TV premiere on September 12th, 2004, but it was also included with the Star Wars Special Edition Trilogy DVDs that came out September 21st, 2004. So that was probably where most people really encountered it for the first time. All them DVD diehards. Other notable releases of the time, we had the movie Catwoman, came out July 23rd of 2004. We had Garden State, came out July 28th.
That's a
That's a
great
good one.
movie.
It is a great
Holy
movie.
shit. That's such a good movie.
Yeah. Alien versus Predator came out August 13th, so that's where we were among those series that I think there have basically been like reboots of or soft reboots of both of those since then. In the Resident Evil saga of things, Resident Evil Apocalypse had come out September 10th.
I can't believe that series
I
went
have
for so long.
I have no idea where in that series that one falls, and I did not care to look it up.
Exactly.
It is one of the Mila Jovovich ones, though. So, just because we mentioned it when we talked about Paul Bettany last week, I wanted to give a shout out to Wimbledon that came out September 17th here.
Hells yeah, that's such a good movie.
I had not realized that this movie was so old. I Heart Huckabees came out October 1st, and really,
That is a weird one, man. That's a weird one.
Yeah, I only think of I Heart Huckabees because like I remember watching that a ton on Comedy Central when I was in college. Like the TV edit, it was just one of those things that like it was always on Comedy Central, and I don't really care about. Are those Paul Anderson, Wes Anderson? Which
It's
of
Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson? There you go. I don't really care about his aesthetic all that much. When Cam and I went and saw, what did we see a couple weeks ago? Free Guy. When we went and saw Free Guy, they had a trailer for his upcoming movie, and I was like, "Yep, this looks like a Wes Anderson movie, hitting all those beats." But you had I Heart Huckabees there back in 2004. And
Heart Huckabees is not a
is
it's
it
not a Wes Anderson flick.
Is it not?
No,
Who does that
it
one?
just
then?
it has a lot of regular Wes Anderson actors. It's a like David O. Russell directed it.
Okay. Then
Yeah.
I was gonna say, isn't that the Mark Wahlberg and
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Which one am I thinking then? I'm thinking of the one with Owen Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow's in it.
The Royal Tenenbaums?
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. Never mind.
Okay, all right.
I just completely
Jeez.
completely confused those two movies in my head.
Yeah,
so.
I was like, there's no way. Like I Heart Huckabees is such a weird freaking movie. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. Like it's not like an aesthetic film either. It's super. Like it's dealing with things like enlightenment and a bunch of other like concepts, and it has. But here's the thing: it does have a lot of traditional Wes Anderson people in it.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean, the only reason I listed it here was because I thought it was that, and I was going to go off on that little tangent. So, yeah, there's why we picked these movies. And then the last one I picked because of Logan Wilkinson, but Logan is not here to enjoy it. But this is also October 8th is when the movie Halloween Town High came out.
Hell yeah!
And I bring that up because Logan made me sit through Halloween Town for last year's Halloween special of episodes. And I think
you. Oh my gosh, that movie is so awesome. I love Halloween Town. Halloween Town High, the last good one.
I mean,
Because
it is the last one with the original Marnie. I will say that. And we will probably. I believe Logan wants to basically do Halloween Town 2 as like part of this year's Halloween entries. So we'll probably maybe we'll get to Halloween Town High next Halloween in 2022. Because yeah, I believe that is the third in the saga.
I didn't know they made more than one.
Yeah, I believe there's a fourth one as well, but there was like a reboot or whatever that is. Like there are like one or two people who were from the original saga who are in it, like the little brothers in it. But yeah, it's
not a reboot, it's a recast. It makes no sense. Marty goes from being like the smartest girl in the room to being like just an absolute dummy, like an absolute moron, and it's terrible.
I mean,
it's an awful film.
I don't think you remember Halloween Town because Marnie's not really the smartest girl in the room in Halloween Town.
She's a child. She's smart. They put the fat ghost in the thing, stick him in there to get his sweat out, and he comes out skinny. It's hilarious.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, Empire of Dreams has a runtime up. I'm just saying I watched it within the last year. Did you?
Yeah, because I was supposed to be on an episode, but I think I was sick or something.
Empire of Dreams has a runtime of 2 hours and 31 minutes. In the Star Wars timeline of things, I did not accurately kind of reflect this back when we were doing the prequels, but this ultimately fell between Attack of the Clones, which had come out May 16th, 2002, and then Revenge of the Sith came out May 19th, 2005. So this is basically like 1 year before we got the finality of the George Lucas Skywalker saga films. Not going to have a ton of things for the who's who of the film, the typical roll call feature, because it is a documentary, so it's always a little weird on these. But we had Edith Becker and Kevin Burns as the directors here, both of whom had a lot of documentaries prior to this, including a handful of documentaries about the Playboy and like the Playboy Mansion and stuff. Edith Becker, including doing a documentary called Playboy Inside the Playboy Mansion. Kevin Burns doing Playboy Inside the Playboy Mansion and like 3 other Playboy documentaries. He also had done a documentary in 1997 called To the Galaxy and Beyond with Mark Hamill. So that was another little Star Wars tie. The writers here, we had Ed Singer, who also wrote, quote unquote, wrote for a lot of those kinds of documentaries, and collaborated basically with Becker and Burns on a number of different projects, including these Hollywood screen tests things that I'm guessing were just like those SNL sketches where they just show a lot of like random screen tests on like who might have been in these movies. He also wrote for the Playboy's 50th anniversary celebration. And after this, he would go on to write a TV documentary on 50 greatest movie animals. So good for you, Ed Singer.
That
Starring,
dude's just way too into the Playboy Mansion. Period.
I mean, all of them. Like Playboy Mansion was getting way too much documentary love for the late 90s, early aughts. You know, just
that is true.
Did that greatest animals end with like bunnies being number 1?
I mean, possibly. It could have been indeed. A little bit of trivia. There were basically only 3 trivia items in here. I pulled in 2 of them. The first one is David Prowse, who portrayed Darth Vader physically in most scenes of the original Star Wars trilogy, was not interviewed for this documentary and is only briefly featured through archival footage. This was allegedly due to strained relationship with Lucasfilm and George Lucas in particular. In parentheses, due to an incident for which the actor was unfairly blamed as a result of a miscommunication. This also led to Prowse subsequently being banned from attending official Star Wars fan conventions. And I read that and I was like, I have no idea what that's referring to. So I went out and Googled it, and it's basically like Lucas thinks that David Prowse like leaked that Vader was Luke's father, because in like some of the promotional stuff for A New Hope, he says something to that effect, which then I don't understand, because like documentaries like this one make it a point to say that like very few people knew of that actual twist. So it's like, if you never actually told David Prowse that that was going to be the twist, how would he have known that that was going to be the twist? Like, how, like, okay, weird that you blame him. So I kind of get behind the like parenthetical there of like, due to an incident where the actor was unfairly blamed for this. So yeah, that was a weird little thing that I pulled from a Den of Geek article following David Prowse's passing, I believe in late last year. I think 2020 is when he passed. Oh. Yeah, November of 2020. So yeah, it was basically like that started resurfacing that issue when the official Star Wars Twitter account was out there, you know, giving an in memoriam. Anyway, so that was a bit of a bummer, but also, you know, fuels one of the comments I think I said when I was recording with Cameron earlier this week, that I would be very like, this is very clearly a like Lucasfilm produced documentary on the making of, and there are some very like, well, I was just investing in George Lucas's genius, and George Lucas being like, yeah, he just thought I was really talented, so he's like investing. And it's like, it is. I drew the comparison to like the Michael Jordan backed Last Dance documentary.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting what a more, you know, quote unquote objective perspective of this kind of documentary would look like. The other bit of trivia I pulled in here, more for the fact that only one of one people found this interesting, is that Perry King, who screen tested for the role of Han Solo and is briefly seen in some of like the screen footage stuff here, played the role in the 1981 NPR radio dramatization when Harrison Ford was unable to do so because of his commitment to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I read that and I was like, I wonder if the person who added that bit of trivia as well as like liked it is related to Perry King in any way. Because
I thought it was Perry King.
It definitely strikes me as one of those kinds of like well, I'm gonna leave my mark on IMDb kind of things. I feel like I've seen a couple times. Like I mentioned, I think during the Mighty Ducks one, that like the one of the actors who played like one of the bad Icelandic people or whatever, like it felt like he wrote a couple of IMDb trivia things in there because they talked about how like this was his favorite scene to shoot in the movie or whatever. Anyway, so that's it for the normal rigmarole. It's definitely going to be a more unique element or unique type of episode of our Summer of Star Wars stuff. So it's nice that we have a fresh voice to bring into the mix here with Christian. But before we dive into some of kind of Christian's thoughts on the overall saga, let's talk about Empire of Dreams and what everybody's thoughts are. I'll kick this off because I'd mentioned, I think, in the past when talking with like Cameron and Logan in particular, the idea that I don't think I'd ever really watched this, and that's probably true. Or if I did, it was because like I threw on the special features of a Star Wars like special edition DVD and just kind of had it playing in the background or something. I definitely don't remember like sitting down and dedicating the time to this. So there are some elements of this that like were new to me, but a lot of it is like rehashing a lot of the same kinds of stories we've seen over the years. But it was still an interesting perspective kind of coming into it fresh. A couple of the things that jumped out at me. One, very weird to see like Walter Cronkite involved in this. But then I appreciate that he's giving like the like historical perspective of this coming out around, Vietnam and the state of the country at that time and how the country kind of like responded to the film as a result. Just kind of like an interesting bit of gravitas that I was not anticipating watching a documentary about Star Wars. I also have like, while I have known about like THX 1138 and American Graffiti, I've never really put them in the context of their time periods. And by that I mean like, obviously Star Wars goes on to be this phenomenon and has been post that phenomenon my entire life. So like whenever I would think about Star Wars and or George Lucas and think about like, oh, that's right, he did a couple movies before that, like American Graffiti. Like I've never had any interest in watching American Graffiti. I've never.
It's really good.
I mean,
You should. It's really, really good.
And that's what this movie is, or what the documentary here is kind of presenting. The fact that it was like the number 3 movie of the year it came out is like, oh, okay. Like I did not like ever expect that. I expected it to be like an indie thing that probably didn't get a lot of traction or something. Well, much more like a THX 1138 kind of thing. So yeah, it was just kind of one of those like, oh, apparently it was like a big thing, and he was like, the fact that he was able to kind of like renegotiate his Star Wars contract after that movie came out and was a hit. I was like, oh, okay, that's a perspective I had never really thought about when I thought of American Graffiti. I just thought of like American Graffiti as the not Star Wars thing that Lucas did.
Yeah, it kind of is in hindsight. Like we have this forced perspective because we weren't around before then. But American Graffiti is like a really, really incredible film. It's really well shot. It's interesting because it's like you said, a contemporary of its time. But like the year that it came out, it was number 3. I think number 1 was Jaws. Like that is this is the era of the USC film school blow up of all these guys who were contemporaries of each other. It's kind of a little bit like I would compare it a little bit like to C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, like being buddies around the pub, sharing story ideas and like critiquing each other's story ideas. Like this is what we're talking about. Like Kubrick, Spielberg, Lucas. Like Lucas is known for being Star Wars and like I was gonna say shoestrung into it, but essentially just like shoved into that corner, that description. But he is at his core an auteur. He like American Graffiti is like, you wouldn't think it's gonna be like this number 3 film of the year, but it's really well shot, really well acted, really well written. Everything in it is just like a top tier film, and you wouldn't believe it with the budget that he had for it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean,
he doesn't repeat it. So
yeah,
he doesn't repeat that miracle, but
yeah, the documentary kind of points out the idea that like the studios were looking for young directors that were going to make films for a young, a younger demographic, younger target audience. And so yeah, it was one of those things. Like I remember, in like theater and film classes, hearing kind of like the era of Spielberg and Lucas and Brian De Palma and Martin Scorsese and like that whole
Francis Ford
class
Coppola.
really coming up. Yeah, Francis Ford Coppola. Like all of them kind of coming up together and stuff, and many of them get name checked, of course, in this the documentary. And it's just because they all went, I think, very particular routes with the kinds of things that they would make. Like I sometimes, and I don't have like the greatest like film history kind of background. Like there are very few movies before 1980 that I've seen, Star Wars being, of course, one of them, and like It's a Wonderful Life, and not
Gross.
too much more. Like I've never gone back and really like examined like film history in a lot of those kinds of conversations and stuff. It's just like film has never really been like my medium of choice anyway, because I grew up gaming and stuff. So I don't have the desire to typically go back and kind of revisit where things were, especially because pacing and techniques and stuff do feel extremely dated for a lot of those things, and I don't have the attention span to give a lot of them kind of that feedback, I guess. So yeah, that was some interesting stuff. It's interesting, like this being something that came out in 2004, seeing like Carrie Fisher openly talking about the idea that like, oh yeah, she was cast in the role under the like the condition that she would lose 10 pounds. Like, that's not a great look. Like, obviously not a great look in the 70s when it happened, but even like in 2004, not a great look that like they're effectively like body shaming this up and coming 19-year-old actress, and we're okay kind of like highlighting. It's admittedly it's like entirely coming from Carrie Fisher in the story and stuff, but it is like, oh man, that's not great. I don't want to hear about that kind of stuff.
What if I told you it still happened today?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm like, obviously, exactly. Like I'm well aware that those are like the horror stories of the industry, but it is like, it takes on a new light in like a post Me Too era of film, and wanting to like expect better of the industry, and so like tying stuff like that to these iconic films that we love and stuff. It's like, oh, that's like, there's going to be a part of me now that is tinged a little bit by that, by this idea that like Carrie Fisher, who is amazing in this role, like they wanted her just to lose a little bit of weight and be more of a sex symbol or whatever, and not even like a sex symbol because of the outfit that she's in the entire movie or whatever. It's like, why did you care? She's in this white gown the entire time.
It is, but it's also, I would also make a point to like, there's a great analog to modern day films in which there is an expectation for example, superhero films.
Oh yeah, yep.
For actors and actresses to be in this Olympian god-like shape that's impossible to maintain.
Yeah.
Kumail Nanjiani, who like is going to be in the Eternals, talked about, he goes, yeah, like your job as a Marvel actor is, if you're not on set, it's to be working out. Like it requires that much dedication. Chris Hemsworth was really out there saying he was never going to play Thor again after a couple of films, because the diet he had to be on for it was just impossible to maintain. Like, yeah. He could do the workouts, but just maintaining the energy level and the calorie level to do something with it is just insane. So we still have, like, this is a I feel like a very small instance in what is a massive issue in regards to the entertainment industry, and also directly to the point to the expectations of an audience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because here's the thing, I know that there's going to be some studio executive that looked at Carrie Fisher and started the kind of go around of the idea of like, she'd look better if she lost like 10 pounds. And eventually that gets going and going and going. Yeah, she should lose 10 pounds. Well, you can have the part, but you have to lose 10 pounds. Like, that's like, because somebody thought to themselves, some guy in middle America is going to be like, yeah, she's a bit pudgy.
No, I don't think it was some guy in middle. I think it was a horny studio exec that was.
Oh no, 100% a horny studio executive. But his reasoning is, like she looked better losing 10 pounds. Hey guys, some guy's gonna think that she's a bit pudgy. She should lose 10 pounds.
Yeah.
It's all of this idea of perception and nonsense and horny executives and all sorts of stuff. That's a massive myriad of issues that's just embedded in the DNA of the entertainment industry. But also, if we didn't see these Marvel actors jacked and yoked out of their minds, like, would we believe that they are these comic book characters that are also drawn to that impossible proportion? Like, that's kind of the idea of them being that impossible proportion. So
yeah, I mean, it's almost it's weirder when it is like when they do it to like somebody like a Chris Pratt, who's, you know, prior to that best known as being like the schlubby, you know, guy from Parks and Rec, and then suddenly he's got these the Marvel abs, or Paul Rudd, and suddenly he has the Marvel abs. Yeah, there was an article I saw.
My favorite excuse that he had. It's like, hey, you're in really great shape. Yeah, I said,
just stop drinking beer. Yeah, yeah.
How much beer were you drinking? Yeah,
yeah,
so good.
Excellent little write off for that. But yeah, there was an article that Kyle O'Connor, right? Formerly of like IGN and Twitch and stuff. I saw him tweeting around and sharing around like that was talking about like male body dysmorphia and stuff like that. And it was like, he was like, oh, I wonder why, you know, 23% of young males have these body issues. And it was like just a thread of superhero after like male superhero, all of them with like the abs and the muscles and stuff like that. And everybody being
the legendary V.
Yeah. Being jacked out like crazy and stuff. And was like, yeah, that's definitely a thing. But I mean, like even there's this surreal disconnect now between like Marvel like hiring those actors and then like giving them like professional trainers and stuff to help them get into that shape for the film, versus like them sending Carrie Fisher off to a fat farm or whatever, as she talks about it in the film and stuff. And again, I would argue, yes, there is an issue there, but there's also like the superhero physique is like a pre-existing thing from comic books and stuff, versus this completely original princess character that like wasn't being drawn from anything.
Oh, you're right.
Like, there's that whole disconnect as well. But yeah, anyway, it's just one of those like, this is a weird like piece of the documentary to kind of like focus on for what it was.
It's weird that they wanted to be like, yeah, by the way, you know how films are problematic? Star Wars, you better believe we're problematic too.
Yeah.
Part of that myriad problem I talked about, myriad meaning multi-layered and infinite.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, not to hang on it too much longer, but and I don't mean to give too many brownie points or pats on the back, but I think it is interesting at least that they were willing to put that in there and even let her give her own testimony of like how she felt about it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's fair.
Yeah. Christian, I was real scared for just a second that you're going to be like, yeah, you know what? Like, you guys are coming down on it, but I think it's fine that they sent her to a fat farm.
they should have made her lose 20 pounds. What are they talking about? Yeah, no,
Hot
of course
take.
not. Of course
Hot
not.
take from Christian over there. No, you're great, Ben. You're great.
I'll throw it to somebody else in a sec, but I just had two other quick little things that I wanted three little things I wanted to highlight. So because I watched it first like a few days ago, and then I had it playing kind of for the last couple hours in the lead up to us recording, so I could like take some notes and stuff. And one of the first things that jumped out at me first time I was watching it is the fact that the first half of the movie is just about making that first Star Wars, and then the second half is the rest of the trilogy and where it goes from there. Because I remember pausing it when they finally get to like opening night of the first Star Wars movie and like seeing the timer, and it was like 1 hour and 15 minutes has already passed and there's 1 hour and 15 minutes to go. And I was like, wow, that's like the exact midpoint of this documentary is just getting to, because I was like, I about 10 minutes earlier, I'd like reached this point of like, they're like, this is the making of the trilogy, right? They're spending all of the time on just the first movie. How, like, when do we get to Empire and the other stuff?
First one is such a phenomenon. Like it was like the biggest catalyst for like this massive blow up.
Yeah.
And it also like cost people, like it cost the executive at what studio was it?
Fox, yeah.
At Fox, it caused him to lose his job because he negotiated away the merchandising rights.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
which nobody cared about until they cared about it. I also want to give some love. I loved the Peter Mayhew introduction story of just
Yeah.
him being, this behemoth of a man, and
Mm-hmm.
like he just kind of like he's seated, and then like Lucas walks into the room and he stands up to greet him, and Lucas is just like, I think we found our Chewbacca. And then also I want to acknowledge the active Christmas special erasure that is going on in this movie. When in the Empire Strikes Back sequence, they talk about how Empire is the introduction of a new villain, Boba Fett, who obviously had been actually introduced in the famously terrible Christmas special that Lucas has tried to remove from existence. So of course, this Lucas-backed documentary is not going to mention that, and it is going to instead say that Boba Fett here started in Empire Strikes Back. So just wanted to highlight those fun things as some of the things I really enjoyed about this.
It's funny you mentioned the introduction of Boba Fett through the animated thing, because right now currently we have like the promotion of Star Wars Visions, which is going to bring Boba Fett in anime. And I was going to do the comparison to how it started versus how it's going using the original animated
Nice.
Christmas special compared to the anime.
Excellent. Very nice.
We haven't forgot, George. We haven't forgot.
Yeah.
Never forget, man. Like, people found the tape, George. You cannot deny that it doesn't exist anymore. People found the tape.
Yeah. One of my favorite bits of the watch when Cameron, when you and I watched The Mandalorian, like behind the scenes and talked about it, was Jon Favreau being like super excited to show George Lucas like Mando's weapon of like, look, it's like from the Christmas special, and then Lucas just being like, I didn't really, that wasn't my thing. And just like that, like
So good.
like Favreau just not knowing that, not being like that obsessive of a fan to know that like Lucas famously hates that thing and tries to disavow it. So I love that, like that just little bit of schadenfreude almost from the Mandalorian behind the scenes.
It's so good.
Christian, as the guest, are there any moments or any little anecdotes and stories that come out of this documentary that you want to highlight as favorite standouts?
I guess before that, I kind of want to piggyback off like one of your first comments about like, oh, it's interesting that it was the halfway point that met up with the launch of A New Hope. Because when I was watching it, I was actually very curious what was going to happen at the halfway point, because I've been studying a lot about like story structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been wanting to compare like narrative storytelling to documentary, and I was like, often in storytelling, the midway point is like the point of no return, and I wonder where in this Empire of Dream stories what they're going to consider that if it does apply. And I was like, oh wow, like it was the launch, because I guess like if they hadn't met the date, then it would have just fizzled in the night. But like that was the point of no return for Star Wars.
Yeah,
that successful launch.
Absolutely is. I think very, very astute in that observation, because it very much is like, if that flops when it's playing to those 37 theaters that opening weekend, we don't get everything else that follows. If people just don't connect with it, it was like, yep, this is the make or break.
I loved the kind of piggybacking off that too. I loved that they had to give that like a negotiation deal for the theaters, that if they wanted that like romance novel movie, then you had to play Star Wars. And I was like, the idea that they had to talk theaters into playing Star Wars by bundling it with a romance movie that we've never heard of.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. Like, even the intro of the thing, like, it's hard to imagine a time before Star Wars. Like, it's not hard to imagine that time, especially if you lived it. It's hard for us to think of, because obviously none of us were alive in a time before Star Wars. But like, I'm sure my parents can remember their childhood and there not being a Star Wars movie. So it was like, all right, hyperbole. Like, Star Wars wasn't the beginning of time here. But yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that negotiation, because like fast forward to later, if you wanted to see the episode 1 trailer, then you had to pick what romance movie am I going to go watch. I'm going to see, I think it was A Bug's Life versus, I forgot the other one.
No, it was Meet
Joe Black.
Meet Joe Black was the big one that really like benefited from it. But they were there were 2 other movies that weekend. I highlighted that when we did the Phantom Menace episode, but I've already forgotten what the other 2 were.
I think one of them was like Wing Commander, but I forget what the other one was. Or I think there was like a Wing Commander movie that was out at that same time.
Yeah, maybe. I can probably try and pull it up real quick. Do you want to tell us another one of your favorite little bits there, Christian?
It was more like a general impression. Like I hadn't. So funny story. I thought this was a new documentary made like just for Disney Plus. And as I'm watching, I'm like, why does this all sound so familiar? And now that I was listening to y'all talk about like, oh yeah, it released in 04 and I was like, you know what? Why it sounds so familiar? Like, because I remember like, people would like rip stuff and put it on YouTube in like parts, and I was like, there was I remember the algorithm put a documentary of Star Wars like in 3 parts, and that's probably what this was.
Mm-hmm.
But where I was going with that was just the general impression. I really liked. What stuck to me is when you don't want to admit it, but sometimes you see yourself in people you don't want to, and like it made me really reflect on myself as a creative when I hear George talk about how much control he wants, and like relating to that, but also looking at it as kind of a cautionary tale, because there does become a point when you take control too far and don't let people rein you in or put guardrails to kind of better steer you. And I definitely reflected on that and spend a lot of that part of the documentary just really stuck with me, and just kind of tell myself, Christian, I know when you start doing projects again, I know you're going to want that control, but also don't forget to and it's funny because the documentary actually makes this point about like how towards the end, like Lucas and that's crazy that the doc like put it in these words of like he became what he was fighting against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I should also learn from George's story in that aspect, not to follow too far down that demand for control.
Yeah. I found the other 2 movies. They were The Waterboy and The Siege.
Oh, okay, so I was totally wrong.
Yeah, no Wing Commander. You might just be thinking of Mark Hamill being in Wing Commander.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
I might
that
have
is
gotten
because
some wires
Wing
crossed.
Commander came out in the 90s, dude.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, but The Siege, that's the one with Santon. What's his name? Never mind. No, we'll move on. We don't have to.
You're saying Steven Seagal? I believe Steven.
Oh, Steven Seagal, The Siege.
No,
okay.
no.
There's another.
No, I was saying Steven Seagal is. I was going to say is in Under Siege.
Siege.
I have no idea what
The
The Siege is.
The Siege is a film about dirty cops trying to take out a informant that another cop is trying to protect, and so he barricades himself in like a police station, and it's like The Siege.
Okay. Yeah, Denzel Washington, Bruce Willis, Annette Bening, Tony Shalhoub.
Never mind. The Siege is totally different film. It's about it's still cop stuff, but it's
This is the secret. Yeah. The secret U.S. abduction of a suspected terrorist leads to a wave of terrorist attacks in New York City, which leads to a declaration of martial law. So yeah, a very different movie than the
very
premise.
different film.
There. Now we're both one and one for completely confusing movies on this episode of That Deep Plus Show.
One last.
It's the last of the summer of Star Wars. We got to get our movies confused.
Summer of Star Wars. I'll say one last thing that I really like. I don't know if really enjoyed is the right thing, but like words, right, guys? But what really sticks out to me was those table reads that they showed, where they showed just how campy the dialogue originally was, and I thought that was super interesting when they're like, oh, the radiation levels in the asteroids, and it just like completely different tone, and it's so much more closer to what when you hear that Luke's wanted to do a kind of a Flash Gordon kind of B-movie sci-fi kind of thing, like it he had it, like the script was like that, and I would love to hear more about whether that actually did get like shot on the set and we lost that in editing, or if we lost that through another draft, another version of the script.
Yeah, I definitely think there were some edits there between like the readings, the line reads, or the auditions and stuff, the screen tests. That's the word I'm looking for. And the final product, obviously. I mean, like I appreciate that. Yeah. Alderaan was originally Organa Prime, is like the name of that planet, and it's like, well, that's where you get Leia Organa from, and Bail Organa, of course. But yeah, I had heard Because Mark Hamill loves to tell that story about like the absurdity of that one line that will never leave. Like I've seen a like mashup video of him telling that over like 5 different like interview
Mhm.
things, and it's like he has that story down pat. He tells that exact same story the exact same way, and like no, so he has the story just as memorized as the line, and it's just always fun to see that. So like when it popped up in this, I was like, I know where this goes. But yeah, it's fun seeing that. But even that is interesting because, of course, like this being done in 2004, like the prequels weren't involving Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford. Like they were just coming in to do this, like as like a favor slash throwback to like reminisce on that. Like it,
Yeah.
like there had been like the little bit of new stuff in the special editions of the
Mhm.
trilogy, but that wasn't like extensive work. So it was cool just seeing them at that point in time. All of this obviously pre Disney buyout, pre them ever coming back to the series, probably never thinking they ever would come back to the series. It's just interesting to see them reminiscing on their legacy at that point, in amidst the, like, even at the time, controversial nature of the prequels. Like obviously there clearly isn't a lot of time spent on the prequels on this. That's there. I think there's a very particular reason they focus on the original trilogy, apart from saying like, hey, they're bringing it back, and that's kind of where we get to in the story. Obviously, after Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones have already come out at that point. But yeah, any other moments you wanted to highlight there, Christian?
I guess just another. Another shout out to like George willing to be like a little bit vulnerable about like his reasoning for wanting to step aside from directing and talk about wanting to prioritize his family. Not really like, hey, I'm talking about his choices. More about his willingness to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because that's, I think, I remember, I think when I've talked about this with Logan in the past, I think Logan has kind of like really sold up had really like hyped up the fact that like it gets into his divorce or whatever. And so like when it really is just a passing mention of like, yeah, and by the time Return of the Jedi kind of came out, like his marriage had kind of fallen apart, and he had to take care of his daughter. It's like, that's really all they're okay. Yeah, no, they don't really dive into that at all. So like it wasn't, I think like maybe Logan remembered that differently or something, but yeah, I was definitely expecting a deeper dive into the toll it took on Lucas compared to what we actually get in this.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When I heard Logan talk about it, I really was expecting like half. Like I thought this was going to be like written behind the music kind of thing of Star Wars.
Right.
I thought it was going to be it. And so I was also surprised that there wasn't more of it. But I guess what stuck out to me was that the little bit that there was, through his own, obviously there's a little bit of narration, but in the small interview clips where it is him talking about it, I was like, oh, like I don't usually get to see this more vulnerable side from even in just like a line or two.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by that was interesting to see.
Yeah. Frank, any moments you want to highlight?
Yeah, well, first, just in general, I definitely really enjoyed it. This is my first time watching it, and I just had a good time in watching it. And I think you kind of were right what you said before, where like if you're a Star Wars fan and like if you know a lot about Star Wars, like it's not going to be a ton of like new information particularly, but it's still fun to kind of hash through and kind of see the making of everything. And I really like the concept of like before Star Wars existed and how they had to go in and like you can't just how it's impossible to explain, and nobody even had made sci-fi movies like that at the time, or they weren't even successful. So I like that angle. And then to what we were just talking about, I do like kind of the angle of it is a lot about George Lucas too, and especially in the beginning and setting up like who is he and where does he come from, and then like what did all these other things he also did like for the brand and for like Lucasfilm and kind of like trying like the industry. But it is funny that when you mention that, yeah, this is like a Lucasfilm production and like Lucas is behind this or involved in just like The Last Dance, and I'm like that makes total sense because this is the first time in a long time, if ever, that I felt like George Lucas was like humanized and like I understood like, oh, okay, he's not just like the bad guy, like he wanted to be an artist and make his thing, and then it kind of got away from him, and like he definitely wants control over all this stuff and he cares a lot. And like there were so many small things that people would mention about George that makes so much sense, especially when you get to like the prequels, where like one of the things that his film teacher was talking about was like everybody had to do a 5-minute short and George's was 20. And I was like that's such a George Lucas ass thing with like these long prequels that just go on. But like there was some fun things like that, or even when they talk about his dialogue and then they have to read it and all the different takes they did and how like that's a problem we noticed with like the prequels. And then another thing too was his directing is just faster, more intense, and like everybody says that about him, about how like that's the only direction you get, and he doesn't understand it takes time to like dial in. He just wants you to do it perfect. Like I wrote it right there, why can't you do it? Like, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds like George.
Yeah, that's such a relatable description. Like I've met, you know, at film school and just on sets like that. I've seen that directors that they have a vision in their head and they just don't know how to communicate across. Like how you know, that's the skill of directing. It's, you know,
yeah, it was definitely interesting because as I'm watching it, I'm definitely find myself thinking, oh, George Lucas is a terrible director. And this is like definitely a thought that I've had kind of over the years, especially after the prequels. But it's like he's a terrible director in that he can't really work with the actors. He doesn't know how to communicate with the actors and get what he's looking for out of them. And he's like effectively giving them line reads when the only direction he's giving is just faster and more intense. He's not, you know, like Harrison Ford says, he's like he's not interested in examining like how to get to those moments or any of that stuff. But then like he doesn't work with the DPs well, like the people behind the scenes. He also had issues with, and obviously he had issues with like the producers and that whole side of things, and that's why he wanted to be an independent guy and have all of the complete control. And so it's the kind of thing like if this wasn't Star Wars, like and the vision that he had behind Star Wars, like he would never have gotten like work because people would have been like he just can't get anything out of the actors. It's like it's fat. And then obviously, yeah, we see all of those things ultimately like kind of play out in their fullest form when he is the George Lucas by the time the prequels roll around, and you see the performances he gets out of his actors and the way those films are shot isn't the greatest, but the things that he can really put his vision behind and the ideas there of the technology and the special effects and stuff, the things that he ultimately spent the next, after Return of the Jedi, 20 some odd years, like almost 20 years working on up to Phantom Menace. Like that's where you see clearly his strengths. But even there, like he's clearly not a people person, and that's something that is pretty essential role in the role of director is being able to figure out how to communicate your vision effectively to other people. So I liked that eventually he kind of starts figuring out maybe where those weaknesses are and figuring out how to communicate by just going in and editing dogfights together and saying, this is what I'm looking for, do this, and basically using that as reference material for the effects that, you know, he's asking of his team and stuff. But yeah, like even like he talks about, you know, I couldn't get the editor to edit the film the way I wanted, so I had to let the editor go. It's like you are everything I hate about like a micromanaging boss, and clearly you're everything everybody else that's talking about you hates about micromanaging bosses. But you're also George Lucas, and Star Wars is a brilliant idea and ultimately comes together. So like, I guess we'll give you a pass, but, you know, also recognize that maybe maybe you weren't the right person to have done that. But then again, like if he hadn't been so into his vision, and trying to get his vision to people and figure out whatever through hell or high water, how to get it across to people, like obviously it would be a very different world that we would live in today. So yeah, it was definitely, like, that was my ultimate kind of takeaway from this thing, is like, oh yeah, like this is confirming everything that like I remember like hearing Red Letter Media talk about in the Phantom Menace and stuff like that when they kind of do their epic breakdown of Phantom Menace, which I feel like I've seen like once in its like entirety, but gets referenced all over the place. But it is like it's like this is the proof in the pudding of kind of everything they really harp on and touch on, um, and a lot of the issues that kind of plague, I think, Lucas in his less favored works. Yeah. Anything else, Frank?
Yeah. The other thing I thought was really cool and interesting is when I wish they spent a little bit more time on it, but the documentary runs long anyways. But it's like when they're actually setting up like Skywalker Ranch. Like, I think that's just really fascinating, and I think it's really cool that they just got to do that in general. Like, obviously, the whole point of the documentary and even Lucas in general is he's like, I want to be independent. I want to be away from all these people. So I think it's cool when you get to this point when they're like, cool. So then they formed LucasArts and they formed this studio and this and this and this, and they had the best of like. He wanted this giant place where they just had the best of everything, and they somewhat did it in some cases because like I know, you can kind of think about it however you want, but like when they showed that LucasArts logo, I was like, hell yeah, LucasArts. I was like, I love LucasArts. And then when they're like, oh, we had this company that went on to become Pixar, and like they were really just making new tech and trying to innovate in an interesting way. Because one of the things that I thought was cool too is they also came up with that editing software that was like the first editing software of its kind, like that, where you could just go through the whole track and like get to the entire piece of footage at once. And I'm like, that's crazy. I never know that they did the first like software that was like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, they were really trying to innovate and change the game, and they did with Star Wars, and they really tried to just keep that going. So it was really interesting to not only get to see a little bit of that and hear about that, but then from George's perspective, you also got to hear him kind of to give that speech where he's like, I live long enough to see myself become the villain.
Yeah.
Where he's like, now I'm this billionaire dude that's at the top of this company. And like, that was super interesting. And a thing that was interesting to me about watching this in 2021 is that not only did Disney buy like Lucasfilm and LucasArts, it's like they bought Fox and they bought like so much stuff is like condensed now.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of like, man, back in the day, he just went independent and made his own company because there were a bunch of different companies and you could kind of like have your stake in the market. And now I'm like, man, Disney really just owns like half of everything, and then everybody else owns like the other half.
Yeah. They've been talking early on about how like, the era that he was coming up in was the era where like the original studios like the Warners were getting out of the business and selling off the business to corporations like and basically alluding to like soda corporations and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, just wait until you get to the end of that story there, George. That's going to be interesting how that plays out. It's fascinating. I'll talk about this a little bit later in the like what else have you been watching, but it was an interesting. I just happened to sit down yesterday with the behind the attraction episode on Star Tours on Disney Plus, which is a great companion piece to this documentary, really, because it's another documentary, but from the like, here's how Star Tours got created. So here's like the Disney aspect, but then also, I mean, it has a lot of like Lucas involvement because he was very involved in Star Tours, and then the lead into, and it gets into like Disney buying Lucasfilm and building out the new Star Wars land and stuff and all that stuff, and it's just a fascinating kind of like just kind of extra companion piece because they talk about elements of like they had to make all this new tech for Star Tours as well, and they were kind of building on new tech, and that continues to be kind of a driving force behind Lucas, even in the Disney era. This came up in the Mandalorian behind the scenes stuff where they're talking about this incredible soundstage that basically like partnered with Epic like to build Unreal like live rendering backgrounds that you're just filming against, and the camera like is basically doing that, and so the actors are on this digital set, but like they can see the digital set. It's no longer green screen and blue screen. It is like they're seeing the world that they're placed in the Mandalorian, even if they're only on an 80-foot soundstage or something like that. So yeah, just I love that even after George Lucasfilm continues to push the envelope in filmmaking and really be kind of at the forefront of that aspect of the industry, and seeing their humble beginnings where they're talking about the idea that there were no special effects houses. Like all the studios had kind of put their special effects out to pasture because that wasn't the kind of movies that were being made at the time. They were making realistic dramas and stuff like that. Like the fact that they had to do that, they had to make their own computers because that was not yet a thing, a commercially available thing yet. Just a lot of like cool stories from that aspect, from the technological aspect of the saga. Any other moments to highlight, Frank, before we throw it over to Cameron for some of his favorite gems?
There was one I wanted to give a shout out to, but I kind of lost it, so we can just keep moving forward.
Cool. Cameron, hit me with your favorite bits.
Hey, yeah. Man, it was so nice to hear like Frank talk like so much. He like it's a joy just to hear his voice and talking about all that stuff. Yeah, I will be honest, you guys took a lot of mine. So I'll just kind of like reference a couple of mine. One of my favorites is the soundstage in England, in London, when they're doing the original Star Wars. The fun and like camaraderie that you can still see lasted until, presumably till today, but also just when they recorded this back in the early 2000s, you can see when they talk about when they talk about their time on that set, going back, like you can see them, they're in the moment back in the 70s. Like they're back to that point again. You get they didn't think that this film would ever be anything special. And so they just had the time of their life. And they're like, we got this dweeby guy who went to a film school directing us, like writing the script, whatever. Like, let's just do it. Let's get, like, a lot of it is like, let's give it our all. Let's give it 110%. And like, let's see what happens out of it. And it's this great experiment of acting, Alec Guinness as this established, well-worn actor who's like, this is dribble, this is garbage, but it's a payday, so I'm doing it.
But it wasn't like that's not even how he is presented in this, at least. I mean, he's presented as like he showed up to do the work, and he was interested in the story. He's interested in being.
I was talking about the younger. I'm talking about the younger folks. Alec Guinness, professional.
Yeah.
He is when I was referencing being the well-worn professional, I meant that he was there to do the work, the professional work aspect of it. And I think it definitely, like, it changed Mark Hamill's life, direction of his entire life, not just the film, but his interaction and learning from Alec Guinness. And like the way that he and Harrison Ford both like credit a lot of like their beginning, their burgeoning acting and evolution to his inspiration is really great. And just kind of like also getting to see that, like, yeah, the people who ran the soundstage and like the crew didn't like George.
Yeah,
the hatred of George Lucas united the cast and crew. But I loved it. But I think one of my favorite parts also is when Carrie Fisher laughs when she made the chart of whose turn it was to take the tape off her boobs. And it's just like Carrie Fisher, just like seeing her just like be blunt and honest, and as honest, I guess, as they would let her. Who's to say that wasn't just the honest truth either? But her bluntness about it is just absolutely fantastic. It made me miss her a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Like especially with the pangs of the echoes of what could have been with the Rise of Skywalker. Like seeing her joyful and happy and full of life. And remembering this wonderful time where she also this is also the era in which she met her husband. It was the father of her child. It would be it's just such a fantastic thing to look at it as like it's this just regular soundstage, but it is the Death Star. It's the interior of every special thing. And the second thing I want to talk about is, and these are the only two things I really want to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about and bring up is not the special effects, but the sound effects.
Yeah,
going into the history of sound effects and how Star Wars changed everything having to do with sound design in a film, especially in the post edit. Coming up with they went over like all the different things that they went through to try to find just the right sound. And sometimes having to combine different sounds and like that kind of ingenuity that Lucasfilm had back then, and still continues to this day, like you mentioned, with the sounds, with the modern stage they use, is to this day like one of the, like, I look back on it and I go, thank goodness, like that sound design in Star Wars A New Hope is perfect.
Yeah.
It is part of the reason why I consider that film to be just like an absolutely perfect film. In the sense that it is just so well put together, and it shows if you can stand to work with George Lucas, hell or high water, you will get to greatness. As long as you don't let him make every decision. The man, like, it shows that this also shows that George Lucas works best when he's being compromised. When you put a wall up in front of George Lucas and he has to try to figure out a way to get around it, that's when you get the best stuff out of it. Hey, George, your script is garbage. Well, you see what I was thinking of. Anyway, I was going to go into the impression, but I just really don't have the energy for it. I apologize. I was going to come in with the impression this entire time, like I was George Lucas, but it didn't work out.
Oh God! Oh God! I would have booted you from the call if you tried to do that. I would have just been like, nope, we're not doing that today, Cameron.
You see, Trevor, when I was putting together Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Jar Jar is the key.
Jar Jar is the key to figuring out the true secret of the Mandalorian. Sorry, it just really is, and like to see what the staff and crew did around him, and like dealing with his like being just the biggest stick in the mud, and the stick in the mud that he is on also happens to be up his ass, is just phenomenal. And seeing just people like, it's like this kind of acted also as kind of like a little bit like the roast of George Lucas in a lot of ways, which is great. But yeah, just the sound design and the staff and the people in the crew putting everything together, which I think bleeds into my first point, which was like the soundstage, like the London crew and the Skywalker Ranch crew put these films together in such a just magical way. So of course Disney bought it.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, because that was actually one of the other things I did want to bring up, was that like the sound stages and the sets look amazing. Like obviously in the movie they look great, and they look almost like believable, but watching like from a camera panned out perspective where you can just see the actual set, and like you can see where like watch them film, and when they run and then they have to stop like off camera because it just the platform just dead stops and it's like a 5 feet drop. Like I thought that was really awesome, and especially when you just kind of watch all the sets get way more detailed and way more crazy as the movies go on.
Yeah, sorry, soundstage when they created Dagobah. I did want to bring up that as well. Dagobah developed its own ecosystem over the course of shooting Empire Strikes Back, which to me was one of the, when they talk about like the detail of this gargantuan project that is Dagobah in the Empire Strikes Back, and it's like they went so hard. The directing in the water, like with the camera, and like the director's there, he's got the camera, he's looking, he's like, I got the shot, go ahead, like cut, we got the shot, good.
Yeah, like snakes actually biting Mark Hamill.
Yeah, because at some point snakes made their way into the swamp.
I mean, they brought snakes into the swamp, like they put snakes in Dagobah, but yeah, it's like what, like that was
have to be snakes.
That I will say like ties to, again, like the point I was bringing about earlier, like George Lucas isn't a great director. The fact that like the unions hated him, and obviously like he has his own, beef against the unions, starting with Empire, but like even in that first movie, and like he didn't want to play by the union rules in England. Like he's annoyed that he has to stop working at 5:30 and stuff like that. It's like, he would drive them to their desk. Like he is the kind of boss that leads to crunch and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, no, you're just terrible. You're a terrible guy in that kind of, like, you're not, like, the safety of your actors isn't tantamount or whatever. Like the fact that you're letting this swamp be created in Skywalker Ranch or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, like this is not great movie making. Like there are so many problems with this stuff.
I think it's great. I think it's wonderful.
It's funny anecdotes because everybody's okay, but like somebody had died in that in Dagobah water or something like that, that would be a very different story. It would be like,
Nope. We would know that person's name and we would salute them every day for their sacrifice.
no, we wouldn't. They would be the poor person who died because of a helicopter crash on Twilight Zone. Like, I don't know that person's
Those
name.
Were kids, man. Those were kids.
And it was John Landis's fault. Like,
Yeah,
just
John
like
Landis.
this would have been George Lucas's
John Landis.
fault.
Well, I mean, yeah, like definitely would have been for sure. Although, like different. An accident happening like in a swamp set is very different from like the travesty that was John Landis putting children in harm's way and having them die. I mean, in front of their family.
I mean, agreed, but also like this could have so easily taken that dark turn. It didn't, thank God.
Sure.
But like, there were not precautions being put in place. Like, I mean, they tell a whole story about the harness breaking before Luke and Leia jump and do that stunt, and it's like, oh, that could have gone badly. So yeah, just lots of
yeah. So sure, yeah, it didn't, but it's great. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I also, you talking about the sound design, of course, like, got to give some love to John Williams. And like this, like, I guess I just never thought about how early in John Williams' career this was, just because John Williams has been so like, John Williams and like video game music are the things I think of that will be played in symphony halls 300 years from now, in the same way that like Beethoven and Mozart are still played to this day. Like, those are the soundtracks that will stand the test of time. It will be Star Wars. I mean, I say that having worked previously in a symphony, and that being the kinds of things that like modern symphonies are playing alongside those other, you know, classic masterpieces and stuff. So yeah, just getting to see John Williams and Lucas giving credit of like, it's one of the few things that came out better than I anticipated. Being like, yeah, because John Williams is the fucking man. So it was great.
He was, is, and always will be the fucking man.
Indeed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He never has to go that hard, but he always goes that hard.
Yeah.
Because he's John fucking Williams. God damn, I love that.
Are you gonna say something, Christian?
No.
No? Okay. I thought I heard. Oh, was it you, Frank? I heard somebody start to interject. Go ahead, Frank.
That's what I thought. One thing that was cool about it with obviously we know John Williams is a legend and pretty much always has been, but I love that he was like, all of these other things, even down to the models and stuff, he's like disappointed in, and like, I wanted it to be better. And that was the like one thing that he was like, no, that's actually better than like I wanted it to be even. And part of me, when I said this to the person I was watching it with too, where I was like, part of me wonders, like, is that because he just can't go down there and do the music himself? Like, because like with the lighting and the cameras and everything, he's like, I could just do it myself. And I'm like, but now he can't. Yeah. Like, this is John Williams' camp.
He's reached a skill set. He can't play every instrument in the orchestra to come up with the score for this film. Yeah. It always breaks my heart, but then I also always forget that Star Wars didn't win Best Picture. So when they talk about like the fact that they were nominated for 10 awards and won 7, but did not win Best Picture, I was like, who the hell beat them for Best Picture? Anybody remember who beat them for Best Picture?
No, off my head, I can't remember now.
Probably a way worse movie, I guarantee it.
Absolutely, especially through the lens of history and the people behind it.
Annie Hall.
Annie Hall beats.
Yeah, Annie Hall won. Ooh,
beat Star Wars at the 50th annual Academy Awards. And it's like,
yeah,
fuck you, Woody Allen.
Fuck you, like,
fuck
dude,
you in your face. That should be the Academy should right that wrong and apologize. And
they won't, because they've already. Of course they won't. They venerate that man like nobody's business.
Exactly. Of course they continue to love Woody Allen. Yeah.
He was Me Too. Like, he was outed as like Me Too'd years before Me Too.
Decades before Me Too was a thing. Yeah.
It's like, hey, isn't that your daughter? Oh, well, no, she was my wife, my ex-wife's adopted daughter, who I raised and who called me dad and father. But now she's my wife. Yeah.
That's some problems, dude. So yeah, that continues to be disappointing, because it's just like, no, especially this was probably one of those first real big cases of like the Academy just not understanding like the will of the people. The fact that this movie goes on to break record after record after record, and in terms of like popularity, ran for a friggin' full year in theaters and stuff,
Unheard of.
and basically never let up. Admittedly, the market was very different there still at the time, but yeah, the fact that like Annie Hall is what is like in the record books for that one that year, it's like boo, boo.
And you know that they all saw it. Like sometimes there's years where like you're like, oh, this didn't win when probably should have. It just probably not enough critics saw it or this or that. But like, no, man, you know everybody saw Star Wars.
Everybody saw Star Wars, man.
Yeah.
Hey, that Lucas kid from USC, like, or Berkeley, whatever school he went to, that film school. Yeah, it turns out he made like a smash hit masterpiece. Let's go watch it.
Yeah.
What an amazing time that would have been. Just like every theater everywhere had A New Hope playing, but it was just Star Wars.
I love one of the, so I Googled, I was like, what movie beat Star Wars for best picture? And Annie Hall's the response that comes up. But like one of the first articles that comes up is James Cameron still can't believe Annie Hall beat Star Wars. And it's from an IndieWire article from like 2018 where he's predicting.
Do you think he's fishing for a comment? Like, you know what? Same thing about Avatar, right?
I mean, it's like
he's fishing for a compliment. Like Avatar didn't get its due.
I'm not looking at the whole article, but like the little blurb that comes up in the Google search is he told IndieWire that he predicts a science fiction movie will win the Best Picture Oscar in the next 5 to 10 years. So yeah, it definitely strikes me as like he definitely had Avatar on his mind, and he's hoping that Avatar 2 will do what Star Wars didn't.
Well, hey, maybe the untold sequel of A Dances with Wolves and Pocahontas might actually be good.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Maybe it'll be it'll be a mix of 2 other movies or something.
We'll see.
3 because you got to include Ferngully too.
That's true.
But yeah. Cool. Any other favorite moments anybody wants to give some love to, give a shout out to, or are we good to move on to the report card? Go ahead.
I did have.
After Frank.
I had one quick one, and because I didn't want to dominate or take over everything, but I did also enjoy hearing Harrison Ford like talk about Star Wars in like a positive light. Like it seemed like he was like happy and wanted to be here, and like it until he got to like Revenge or Return of the Jedi when he was saying that Han should have died. Like I felt like he was happy and go get it, and then all of a sudden it like flipped, and he was like back to the Harrison I'm used to.
Yeah.
Like that was a time capsule I like to see.
Yeah, the whole idea of like him just thinking my arc was done. I didn't have anything left to do. It's like, all right, sure. No.
We want a happy ending, Harrison.
Yeah.
Strangely, hearing that in this documentary, and I'd heard that before, but weirdly enough, like I don't know if I'd ever been an hour in film and everything into the documentary, but something about hearing it this time, I kind of warmed up. I was like, you know what? Maybe I would have been down for that to see. Like, obviously, if it had been done purposely, not like between 5 and 6, they randomly decided, like, hey, we're gonna write it into the opening crawl that he's dead. Like, no, but if it had been purposeful to have one of the main core or someone truly major, like Lando or someone die, like in a scene, and for it to mean something, I think I would have been down for that after all. When I heard it.
It's definitely interesting. I think it's fascinating because I feel like doing something like that shifts the conversation slightly. I mean, like, because like this is also the movie that gave us the biggest twist in cinema history of like I Am Your Father, and I think there was already this weird debate of like, is he lying? Is he telling the truth? And if you were then also like muddling the conversation coming out of the movie with like, and I can't believe they killed Han. Like, I wonder what the legacy of the movie would be if you'd added in that other, bombshell kind of moment. Because like obviously it is like, oh, it's the darkest of the trilogy or whatever because it ends on not a great triumphant moment. Even there, it's like, I mean, they escape, so it's not as bad as it could have been. But yeah, it's not the first or third movie that is ending in blowing up a Death Star and celebrating. So just by the nature of not blowing up a Death Star, yeah, it is the darkest of the original trilogy. But yeah, it'd be very fascinating to in the grand scheme of the Disney Marvel show What If right now. What if Han Solo had died in that carbonite? What would Star Wars have become? Be a very fascinating alternate universe that's out there somewhere. Any
report card.
any last moments, or are we good to move on to the report card?
My last moment was like, man, I got strangely emotional. When we're talking about designing Yoda, and then how that was Frank Oz himself, right? That modeled himself over.
No,
after himself.
No, that was Frank Oz
that?
was the performer. I don't remember the name of the gentleman who modeled Yoda, but yeah, it was like I want to say he was a Muppeteer. Maybe
that story, and when you see the concept sketches, that how they start really mirroring him, I got really emotional in a, I don't know how, like it reminded me of that moment in Hook when the kid's like, oh, there you are, Peter. I was like, whoa, like that's crazy. I mean, Yoda just has such a great design, and to see that it was born out of people inserting themselves into their art, and that always, it's very scary for an artist to allow themselves to put themselves in their art, and I always look at it as a very brave thing for someone to do. Sometimes, in the wrong hands and in the wrong way, you can be very egotistical. But this was one of those examples of like genuinely realizing like the best way to make this happen is to go ahead and put myself into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So yes, let us dive into the report card. So this is the part of the show where we grade the offering from a scale of A+ to F. So I will go ahead and kick things off on this one. I give this, it's interesting, obviously, especially like this juxtaposed against everything else that we've done, because very different very different goals for this. But ultimately, I give this kind of a straight C. It's a fine documentary. It doesn't really do anything like dramatically where I say like that was a really great documentary. But it's also like it's not anything like super egregious. It is, showing this like Lucas and acknowledging that it's like not Lucas in the best light, even though it is, Lucas obviously kind of behind the project. So yeah, it was just kind of like it's fine, it's good. It's not something I probably ever need to really sit down and watch again, but it was a good documentary. I think I enjoyed it. So yeah, straight up C for me. Frank, what do you want to give this?
I pretty much agree with everything you were saying there, and I think I'm gonna go B minus. Like I like it. Like you said, it's a good documentary. No matter what, it's fun. It is about something I'm interested in, and the summer in Star Wars of general has gotten me really reinvigorated and back into Star Wars in a way I kind of forgot, like how things I did love about it, and some things that I really do like about it. And this is just a lot more of that. And it even reminded me, like, yeah, the original trilogy is so awesome and so special, and I think this is just a fun documentary to watch if you're just interested in Star Wars, So, but like, I think to your point, it doesn't do anything incredible. And if they did dive deeper into some things that we know happened, I would be more interested in that. And if they did have like, this is David Prost to tell his side about things, I'd be like, wow, that's wild. Like,
Yeah. Cameron, where would you want to grade this?
My grade on it is just a solid B. I think it does so much of. I would be a little bit lower on it if it just didn't give us so much.
Yeah.
If you are new to Star Wars, or if you've never really cared about behind the scenes stuff, but you kind of want to take your toe and dip it in here, it's great. It gives you kind of like this is Star Wars behind the scenes 101.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is the stuff to get you kickstarted on your behind the scenes journey. If you want to get deeper into stuff, there's a literal library that you can like go through that has tons of information about the making of these films, the development, the culture around them. I just think it's such a nice film. Like it's a little bit roasty of George, and it does have a little bit of those Last Dance. Like yeah, he did produce it, so grain of salt. But I still also just think it is 3 hours of just Star Wars. So of like just like the making of Star Wars, and also the foundation of Lucasfilm and everything about Lucasfilm's beginnings. All of that in the first half of that movie are just absolutely fantastic. So
cool. Christian, where would you want to rank Empire of Dreams? And then I realized as we started doing this segment that I never circled back around to you to get your thoughts on the rest of the saga, so we'll dive into that next. But for Empire of Dreams, since you are filling in for Logan this week, what grade would you like to give Empire of Dreams?
I actually want to give it like a soft A. Like
Okay.
I definitely recognize how much more it could do, but I also recognize that even as far back as 2004, like man, like George and like I again words. Basically, I'm very happy with how much I share in this. I could totally seeing him being like, oh, I don't want them to put like the line about them, clowning me for being serious and stuff like that. And I would and talking about Harrison Ford wanting Han to die. Like a lot of the stuff, like Cam said, is available everywhere. But I think this is a nice, solid package. Which in other situations, something that barely meets like something that's passable for entertainment, I would kind of give it a C. But this had the right directing to pull at my heartstrings, and I mean, I'm very easy to please, and also like I love documentaries, and documentaries about filmmaking is what made me want to be a filmmaker, and so this like definitely just plays to like what I love in entertainment. So
Well, there you go.
I get a soft A.
You are effectively the target audience for a project like this.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. So since we haven't had you on for the summer of Star Wars along the way, what are some of your big takeaways across the rest of the saga? Are there any huge standouts? Did we get things completely wrong as you've been listening to us? Can you not understand at all why Cameron loves the Phantom Menace as much as he does?
Pod racing.
I mean, pod racing is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Even every episode has kind of like I agree partially but not. But it's weird because I don't find myself what's the backseat quarterbacking so much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's because it's just I don't know if I don't know if the sequel trilogy like pushed me away so far that like I'm kind of like not that I'm not invested. It's just that like Star Wars hit me so much like as a kid. It's just such a solid foundation of like what I enjoy in storytelling that like ranking and stuff is kind of like it's fluff. Like not to take it away from the conversation, but like
yeah.
I'm really just more happy to hear people talk about it than think about what I would rank it, if that makes sense.
No, that's absolutely fair.
That being said, I did rank it.
There you go. We will dive into that in a moment. Yeah, I mean, like obviously, my favorite aspect of this series has just been like the conversations we're having. Like so many a time I get to like I pull out my notepad to do the ranking. I'm like, where am I going to rank this? Like in the moment, like if I throw it to somebody else before me, it's because I have not yet put down a thought of like what I'm actually going to give this yet. Because like that's like the last thing I really care about in this. Even we'll get to it like when we do the individual rankings and stuff. Like I didn't really sit down and be like, what's my number one and do any of that. I just kind of looked back on my notepad of like all the grades and I looked at that. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much where I would put these. So I'll just order it. Like anything that I gave like the same grade to, I'll figure out what in the hierarchy I want to, which of the A pluses do I really want to make like the number one spot. I did that. But like for the most part, it was just like, yeah, no, I mean, this hasn't changed too much over the last 3 months. Like this is a pretty solid list. I graded these pretty appropriately to where I think I feel with them today. So, but yeah, any other particular standouts of, just of the like any favorite moments across the series that you want to touch on before we dive into actual rankings?
I would say just like one of my, one of my favorite scenes. I guess I'll just say from the entire saga that always gets me is this long tracking shot and not very long. It feels long. It's so emotional that it feels like a really long shot. But there's a tracking shot in Return of the Jedi. The duel with Luke and Vader. That when the choir like just like starts like doing these hymns. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not very musically inclined, so I'm not sure I'm using the right word. But there's just this haunting, like, kind of music playing during this tracking shot that, like, it's one of those moments that I'm always. I just hope one day I can make something that makes people feel the way I feel, like that, like just the gravity of the desperation in that situation. Because for me, that fight, just in general, like that whole duel, in Empire Strikes Back, there's so much anger in the duel between Luke and Vader, but there's so much sadness in the duel between the two in Return of the Jedi, and that one tracking where like just really, I get those out.
No, that's awesome,
so, and it really sticks with me.
Very cool. Love that. All right, so before we dive into individual rankings, I think we've got to kind of figure out where this falls in the That D Plus Show ranking of things. So for those just joining us, as a refresher, at number 12 we have Attack of the Clones. Number 11, Rise of Skywalker. Number 10, The Clone Wars. Number 9, The Phantom Menace. Number 8, Solo. Number 7, Revenge of the Sith. Number 6, The Last Jedi. Number 5, The Force Awakens. Number 4, Rogue One. Number 3, A New Hope. Number 2, Empire Strikes Back. And number 1, Return of the Jedi. So where do we want to place Empire of Dreams among all of those, like, completely very different genre of films? Anybody?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure. Yep.
Why don't we give it rank 0?
No, I don't want to give it that suggestion.
Well, I was about to say, like, rank null, like, whatever you want to say. Like, I think that it was a fun way to kind of, like, end things on in a really great way, but I don't know if it's, like, it really compares to any of, like, the actual narrative films.
Yeah. I mean, and
like, it's a documentary. It's not in itself a. And by the way, this documentary was made for TV. It was an ABC thing.
Right. Yeah.
So like,
it's really good for that too.
Oh yeah,
it just seemed like it could have been in like a movie theater.
Early 2000s, ABC was doing some really interesting like Sunday special documentary type stuff. Really good stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's.
I mean,
I don't want to say it's not fair, but it's weird to try to be like, listen, this is still better than Attack of the Clones.
I mean. I would say exactly like that. Like they're like, we could put this in our ranking of like, well, I think I would rather watch this than like the worst of the worst Star Wars or whatever, wherever that falls. I mean, like for me, for example, I would probably put this either at like 8 or 9, so either above Solo or The Phantom Menace, because I would rather watch this again than those movies probably. Like there are elements of those movies I would go and like watch a clip of, but I would not want to watch the entire thing. And that's kind of where this falls for me. Is like, oh, there are interesting anecdotes in this, but I don't really need to give up that 2.5 hours again anytime soon. So like if ultimately the panel wants to lean towards Cameron's like let's kind of give this a pass, I'm fine with that, but that's where I would put it, just as where I would start the conversation would be like, there are Star Wars movies I think that are worse because of just where they fall and how they're made than this. Frank, any thoughts from you?
I agree that it does kind of feel weird to rank it the same or kind of fit it in. But I also wouldn't, when using your same logic, which is kind of how I was thinking about it or was trying to think about it, like, yeah, I also would probably put it above Solo, if not above Phantom Menace. Like, I'm kind of at the same place with you. Like, if anybody wanted to argue to put it above Phantom Menace, that'd be cool with me. But I would at least probably put it above Solo, because it's like, well, it's just like I think this is a good documentary. Like, it's like ranking it on terms of like, if it like they made good movies with some of these Star Wars movies and they made some of them that aren't as good, and this is just a good documentary and they set out to really achieve their goal, and I think they did well with it. And like, I would rather watch it and just have it on in the background even than like some of the lower tier Star Wars movies, especially because like one of the biggest criticisms of some of those is that they just drag on and even just get boring. And this isn't like super boring ever. Like, I'm still interested in, and if anything, there's still just this hint of like, oh, Star Wars. Like, I'm watching things fly around and props and lightsabers, and I'm like, oh, it's so fun.
Yeah. Christian,
I've ranked it on my list, so I'm okay ranking it.
Okay. Christian, where would you fall in this conversation?
in my personal ranking or like in y'all's D plus
in our D plus ranking.
I didn't consider it being ranked, but I feel like my feelings pretty much mirror Frank's though.
Okay,
that's probably the best way I could put it, or the quickest I guess.
Well, and then Cameron, I know, and like you can definitely throw your thing in there as well. But I know because you're probably like warmer on both Solo and the Phantom Menace than us. I would also like if you wanted if we wanted
I would put it below either of those films.
I was gonna say if you wanted to put both of those films above it, and we just put this above the Clone Wars in at number 10, I'd be okay with that too.
I'm okay with that.
That works for me as well.
Yeah. So we would put this in at number 10, behind the Phantom Menace, and then we have basically number 11, the Clone Wars, number 12, the Rise of Skywalker, and number 13, Attack of the Clones.
Where it fucking should be.
Because the Solo one was weird for me, because like on the one hand I feel like Solo is just a better movie in terms of like if you were going to watch it, and it's not a bad movie, but I really don't like it, and I would probably rather turn on the documentary.
Yeah, it's one like that's an interesting one for me, because I definitely like, and maybe it was because I was the one writing the promo tweets, and I basically just like turned the promo tweets for the Solo episode last week into like, why in the fuck did somebody think and say like, you know what, we really need to justify Han's last name? That's like, oh my god, I got so mad about that. Like I was mad about it on the show, but then I just kept thinking about that, and just like, and so like my thoughts on Solo have just probably gotten even angrier since us discussing it last week. Huh?
In regards to Solo, I was appalled that nobody brought up how Solo confirms that Spanish exists in the Star Wars universe.
Oh, you know what? You're right, Christian. I'm so sorry. I dropped the ball on that. I remember having that conversation with you about it before.
We out there, y'all. We out there.
Yeah. I mean, is Solo only one in Spanish? Because I feel like that has like almost just general Latin origins.
I joke. Solo
of course,
a shorter, solitary or something like that, or
right, yeah, of course.
But I'll try to fit in things like that.
No, I appreciate that.
Representation matters, man. Representation matters.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And I definitely there's a hint, or there's a second like earlier on when we were talking about the episode of like, especially when you were talking, Christian, about how like you grew up loving this and whatnot, and I definitely found myself thinking about like Oscar Isaac in Solo being like good Hispanic representation there, and I appreciated even more that it's not the kind of representation that I always see you kind of lamenting on social media of like Spanglish speaking, and just kind of throwing in the occasional Spanish phrase just to come across as more representative than probably is natural. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that at all, but it was definitely a thought that crossed my mind earlier.
Not in particular. I'll just say that like it was always I guess no, never mind. No, I'm not gonna start.
All right, cool. Well, then we can dive into everybody's personalized rankings. So I will once again I'll go ahead and kick these things off, especially because I kind of already talked about it a little bit. But so basically what I did for my rankings is I just kind of looked through, saw what I had graded everything, and kind of threw that into a docket and figured out if I wanted to shift anything around. So based on that, the movie I gave a D- to, and the bottom of my list is The Clone Wars, the animated one. The D+ grade I gave was to Attack of the Clones. That comes in at number 12. I gave out 2 C-, one to The Phantom Menace and one to Solo. And so of those two, Donald Glover wins out, and Solo takes the number 10 spot, and The Phantom Menace takes number 11. Empire of Dreams, as I said earlier, just kind of gets a solid C, which also Rise of Skywalker gave, but I would still, despite all of my problems with Rise of Skywalker, I know if at least I'm going to sit down and be entertained for 2.5 hours, like it's going to be a fast-paced, just like I can turn my brain off and enjoy Rise of Skywalker. So Rise of Skywalker goes in at number 8, Empire of Dreams at number 9. Then we get to my B- grade, which was Revenge of the Sith at number 7. My B+ grade of The Force Awakens at number 6. I had 2 A's in A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, so I went ahead and gave A New Hope the edge there at number 4, Return of the Jedi at number 5. And then the remaining 3, Last Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, and Rogue One, are all my A+. So I put Rogue One in at number 3, in large part, like following up on our conversation. I think Rogue One is probably the best standalone, but there's also this weird element of like Rogue One isn't as impactful if you don't know A New Hope. But still, it makes A New Hope better. And so I found myself a little surprised by looking at that ranking and being like, yeah, no, I guess I would probably rank Rogue One above A New Hope, because I do think A New Hope has enough in the way of, like, especially for my interests today, pacing issues and stuff like that, whereas Rogue One is, I think, just more efficiently paced throughout. But then Empire Strikes Back takes my number 2 spot, and The Last Jedi, given my love of that film, takes my number 1 spot. So that's my rankings. Hate me if you want, internet. I don't care. I am a Last Jedi stan and will continue to be. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
All right. Hit us, Frank.
When we were doing the rankings together as a group, I definitely tried to go a lot based off of like, oh, it was like the best movie, or was this a better movie, or stuff like that. But with this, obviously it's personal, so I just tried to. I also tried to really gauge it off of like comparing them and being like, which one would I rather watch at any given moment. So for me, the bottom of my list is Rise of Skywalker. That's just kind of coming in last. I think I still kind of stand by. I think Attack of the Clones is probably the worst movie, but I would still probably, I think, rather just turn it on than Rise of Skywalker. Like, really, I would, if I said this the last time after I watched Rise of Skywalker, but if I never saw it again, I would be fine with that. And then if we rewatched it for this, and if I never saw it again, that'd probably be fine.
Yep.
Then above that, I did the Clone Wars. I really enjoyed that one, and I think it handles the clones a lot better than Attack of the Clones does in a lot of ways, but it is very clearly just TV episodes that they turned into a movie. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, I have Attack of the Clones above that, which kind of sets up everything for that movie. And then coming in behind that for me would be Solo. And now, as I've kind of noted, not a huge fan of that one, but it kind of gets the edge being modern and being a little bit faster pace. And then after that, I would put Phantom Menace, I think, finally, because I really debated on this one, and you could kind of flip flop those, but Phantom Menace has pod racing and a couple other cool segments that I enjoy. So, and then surprisingly high for me, Last Jedi here. This is one that I acknowledge just is a pretty like good movie in terms of being a movie, but there's just parts of it that I don't like as much. And then I would put Force Awakens next after that. That's my favorite of the sequel trilogies, even though I'm not really just hot on them in general. And surprisingly high for probably a lot of people, but I would put Revenge of the Sith kind of in my next spot above that. Coming in at that would be number 5, I guess. And then this is what I thought was interesting, but this is kind of how I'm feeling on it today, especially after the documentary. But I would put, I think, Return of the Jedi next. And then kind of going through the original trilogy here, I would put A New Hope and then Empire. And then that would leave me as my number 1 personal favorite at Rogue One.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah. And that's just definitely
very cool. Solid list there. Christian, you want to hit us with your rankings, and we will close out with Cameron and all of the Cameron takes?
Yeah. Before I do, y'all want to hear something funny?
Sure.
So Frank told me that I should have like my rankings right, and so I had my phone, made my little rankings at work today, and then as I was sitting down, I had my little notebook that I took notes of the documentary in, and I was like, let me put my rankings on. And both times I forgot to put the sequel trilogy. Because I guess I'm just like, to me, they just didn't exist, I guess. I just completely forgot about them.
It's probably the Logan Wilkinson school of thought. Oh, we will also, of course, rank everything for Logan since he's not here. We can do that either before or after Cameron. But go ahead and hit us with your thoughts there, Cam or Christian.
And so I'm starting from lowest to highest. That's what I'm
sure. Yep.
Okay. So last place is the Clone Wars. First off, I didn't when I watched, I didn't think it was like episodes stitched together. To me, I thought it was like purposely written and animated as an animated movie. But even then, I wasn't ready for I just don't really like that version of Ahsoka, which I get. It's that's how we all start. We start at point A, and then by the end of the arc,
yep.
But it's just like all the stinky, his fuzzy wuzzy or whatever he calls them. Like
yeah.
I mean, I was kind of a kid when those came out, and that doesn't. It was out of touch. It was out of touch. So Clone Wars last. Second to last is man. I'm about to go. Oh man. Do I want to do it?
Give us all your spice, Christian.
Do it. Go.
No.
Yeah. Give it. Come on, Christian. Christian, you want it. We need it.
I was listening to the Emperor say, "Do it." No. Solo after that. Solo.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually got to see Frank recently and told him some of my thoughts on Solo, but I just completely think it's miscast and I don't like at all much of what they did. And I agreed a lot with what y'all guys were saying in that episode about it was just a movie revolved around how did these things happen? How did he get these trinkets and this costume and everything? And it's just totally. Yeah, no, I'm not going to spend more time. But yeah, it's, so after that, next up, sorry, I got chicken scratch for handwriting. Is The Last Jedi.
Okay.
It's and I almost wanted to put Solo above Last Jedi, but at the last, I guess what saved Last Jedi from being in Solo's place was the hyper base attack and some of the lightsaber battles. But man, I know we all know that everybody is split right down the middle on that Jedi, and I really liked everything it wanted to do, as in let the past die, Jedi got to end. I wanted that. Everything that the trailer was selling me on, I wanted, and I personally, everybody interprets Star Wars differently, everybody interprets movies differently, and for me, Luke's last lines are what kind of put the nail in the coffin for this one. It's the fact that he's I'm not the Jedi. And it's well, I kind of wish you were. The war isn't over. Well, I kind of wish it was. I forget the other one, what the other line is. But I really wish that movie had delivered. And I remember, I don't know if I'm making this up in my imagination, but when Kylo says join me and we'll rule together, and she says no. I don't know if I'm projecting, but I could have swore that my theater said that, because I was why you're Mr. Let the Past Die, so why are we treading this old ground? And when have you ever talked about wanting to rule anything or be in charge? And I just completely felt I'm just disappointed. So that's why I really don't like Last Jedi.
Fair.
And willing to put but after that, Rise of Skywalker, which is kind of a bland film, but bland. I know they say bland is worse. Having no opinion is worse than nothing. But for some reason, it hits me softer since it's less offensive, I guess, than Last Jedi. So that's why I kind of put it. I'm more down to rewatch it because I'm less likely to have my blood pressure raised. After that, Force Awakens. And I feel bad that all these newer ones are so low on my list, but
it'd be like that.
It's fine, and I was glad that I was very entertained by the questions that JJ was asking. Now we know what happened to all those. It's just nothing. After that, or the next slot up is Rogue One. What can I say here? What I knocked out of the park. I ranked these like to kind of give context for these rankings. Like I ordered from top to bottom, even though I'm reading them in reverse.
Right.
And what the scale is, or how they're in order, is like the ones close to the top are the ones that give me the most emotional payoff, or the ones that grab my heart most and give me the most feels. And Rogue One is like that's an A. That's how I personally grade. It's like, man, I just like get so invested in all the characters, and very understanding that they all have to meet the ends that they did. Oh no, I'm so bad. I kind of skipped. I was like, what is this 1, 2, 3? Those are my episodes 1, 2, and 3. So then climbing up after Rogue, I'm gonna go through this fast because I'm to recap, starting from the bottom. Clone Wars, episode Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
This is what happens when it's like
it was Clone Wars, then Solo,
Wars,
then Last Jedi, then Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker, Force Awakens. So still on track, but there's the prequel trilogy between there and Rogue One.
Oh, okay.
Which,
I was curious. I was curious about that when you came in with Rogue One. I was like, oh wow,
no,
Christian likes
the
Christian likes the prequel trilogy way more than I thought he did.
I do like them a lot better. That's why they're higher than the sequel trilogy. Because I would, for all my nitpicks against any of the prequel trilogy, midichlorians and Jar Jar and all that, like it's all still, because I was so young when those came out. Like there still is a level of nostalgia that beats out what the sequel trilogy is for me. I don't ever really think about the sequel trilogy or anything, but like with Duel of Fate, I'm kind of mixing them all up in the conversation. But like Duel of Fate, and some of the cringiness is even more entertaining than some of the disappointments of the sequel trilogy. Anyways, let me kind of go ahead and finish out this ranking stuff.
Yeah.
After Force Awakens, it's Revenge of the Sith, which I just don't like any. I don't like the lava fight. I don't like getting rid of Mace and just like all of Anakin's mistakes. It's and only a Sith. I know I said I wasn't talking. Oh my god, it's just like
Mm-hmm.
It's a trap. It's a trap. I get caught in these conversations, and I just want to keep going on. After that, it's Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones. There's a lot of things that you guys didn't like about it. I agree with you, but I'm also like a sucker for like, look, I know Lucas thinks he made like the greatest romance story ever, and like, no, you didn't. But Across the Stars is such a beautiful song that I suspend my disbelief just when he plays that song. I kind of it's the sugar with the medicine that makes me like, hey, you know what? Fine, okay, I'll suspend my disbelief just with that, which is more of a tribute to John Williams than Lucas stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That song helps the CGI pair go down.
Yeah. And then Phantom Menace, which Jar Jar and Senate talks is all very boring, but like you said, pod racing and Duel of the Fates, it's got a lot of good going for it, and again, the nostalgia carries a lot of it as well. After that, we got Rogue One. Kind of, I did label all these, and Rogue One, if you're going in an ascending order, that's the first A. And Empire Dreams is on this list, so even it be Rogue One.
There you go.
I already mentioned a little bit about Rogue One, about how invested I was in this character, so I'll kind of go over that. But Empire Dreams is what I put that over Rogue One, because again, like I'm talking about these as movies that hit me emotionally, and again, like watching, I got super emotional and super like my tears welled up watching this last night, because I wanted to watch it like fresh before the podcast recording.
Yeah.
I could rewatch this. I could have this on loop again when I talk about like how much I really like documentaries, especially about filmmaking and artists and creators, and just hearing all of them talk about the odds they were up against and the conditions they were in, how they still like fought for it, and I could literally have this movie on. So yeah, I still stand by what I said earlier about like, yeah, it's totally an A for me. It's perfect movie for me. or
Cool.
one. It's pretty close to a perfect movie.
Cool.
And then rounding out the top three, we have Revenge. It was once upon a time called Revenge of the Jedi, but no, Return of the Jedi. What keeps it low is kind of like I like Star Wars when it has humor, but something about some of Han's take was like really what brought this film down. Everything else, like, I really love about this movie, but Han's kind of silliness really brought it down. That's probably why I'm all like, yeah, he probably should have died. he some of that carbonite must have frozen some of his coolness. He lost some swag. He was too stiff.
Fair.
After that, Empire Strikes Back, which I know a lot of people would consider Empire number one. But maybe it's the teacher in me that like I really do get kind of frustrated at like Luke's not willingness to like pay more attention and stop, and that's part of the journey. I totally get that. Like, yeah, this is where he makes his mistakes to learn from them later, But it also doesn't help as the watching experience knowing that I'm having those frustrations.
Yeah.
And number one is just like I know it's a lot of people's like. Not a lot of people, but I am like surprised at how often I hear like, oh well, Luke is so whiny, or it's so boring, or this and that. But no, to me, this is just like a fantastic hero's journey. Like I'm going to use all the same, sound bites and that people have been saying for decades. But like, yeah, it's just like a really great tale, and it's just like and the story behind it, like it's almost hard not to watch the movie now without seeing the DNA in it, like knowing the history of it. And it's just like if Star Wars had just stopped at Star Wars, like it'll probably still be one of my all-time favorites. Yeah, that's
cool.
I totally get that.
Solid ranking there, Christian. Thank you for joining us in this fun little exercise. So Cameron, before we throw it to you, do we want to come up with our official Logan Wilkinson rankings, since he isn't here to defend himself?
Yes, 100%.
So we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but yeah, where do we want to? So obviously, he says that his favorite is Return of the Jedi, but do we really think it's Return of the Jedi, or do we think Return of the Jedi is like the bottom of the list, or do we think it's like the middle of the list?
He likes it fine. Like it's an okay movie. It's a bit too upbeat at the end for his taste.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you think about it, it definitely is like right there in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Either at the 6 or the 7 spot.
Yeah.
I definitely think he prefers the characterization of Luke in The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker to how they handle him in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
He has gone on the record saying that, but I think number one still has to be the introduction of what he feels is the definitive like science that helps piece Star Wars together and keeps it whole as an entire saga, midichlorians.
So we're
which
going
is
with
why I think
number one is the Phantom
number
Menace.
one, Phantom Menace, without a doubt. Number two,
it's also it's also the number one chronologically. So
yeah,
you got like that. That's
history.
Just logical.
He's a big fan of history. There you go.
Yeah.
It tells a story that happened before the films. He likes it. There you go.
That is literally the most historical of the Star Wars that we have to date.
That's true. Second, I think would probably be Rise of Skywalker. He says that is like you cannot find a flaw in that film. I disagree, but he's adamant that without a doubt it is a like solid film, top to bottom, makes total sense. No matter if you stop and take a moment to think at any moment that film, it all comes together.
Yeah,
and is the perfect conclusion of the entire Skywalker saga.
I mean, you got to imagine he gives that an A++, right?
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, S ranking for Phantom Menace. Next, but like here's the thing though, he also says that it's the definitive reason why he thinks it's the second best is because it puts such an emphasis on last names.
Yeah.
Well,
so of course then we're thinking Solo's got to be next. What do you think about
Solo
that,
has
Frank?
to be next. I mean, Solo has to, well, no, you would think that, but actually, because he loves Luke's characterization in The Last Jedi. He thinks this is the best way that Luke should have gone out. just like the top tier, like Luke storyline is in that film. So he put it after Rise of Skywalker as his number 3.
All right, so
Then
we got Last Jedi. So we got Phantom Menace, Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, then Solo. All right,
Then
Frank.
Solo.
Frank, what do you want to say is Logan's number 5 then?
Oof. I guess number 5 would. Well, we already did Phantom Menace, so yeah, then it would probably be Attack of the Clones.
That's what I'm thinking as well.
I don't know how he can say that.
How Attack of the Clones is number 5? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it comes down to. He loves he loves just Mace Windu brutally murdering Jango Fett in the battlefield, decapitation, traumatizing a young Boba Fett. He loves baby Boba Fett.
He loves baby Boba Fett.
We know how much he loves Boba Fett as a character as well. So this was the introduction of Boba Fett. So yeah.
The moment he realized it was Boba Fett, he told us at the time that Attack of the Clones came out, when he found out about baby Boba Fett, he thought it would definitely be number 1.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he rewatched him, he's like, midichlorians, they tie everything together so well.
Yeah. I mean, apart from Phantom Menace, it was his number 1 for a long time there. Yeah. And then I think ultimately the midichlorians have won out. And so it did Phantom Menace outtakes the sequel trilogy there. So I think we kind of already discussed that Return of the Jedi goes in number 7 there, so you got 6 ahead of it, 6 below it. So what do we want to say is his number 6?
The Clone Wars, like the animated.
He loves Stinky. He loved he really wasn't a fan. He really wasn't a fan of like the beginning parts where like kind of emphasized like the kind of like dynamic the Clone Wars had. He really got into it the moment that they really introduced Jabba's son.
Yeah.
And he's like, Jabba having a son builds so much dynamic for that character that he's a loving father as well, on top of everything else.
And he has a cousin.
And he has a cousin, and it brings so much to the Hutt clans and like everything. He just felt it was so great.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking number 8, Empire of Dreams. Throw that one in here today.
Yeah, that's a good
throw
idea.
it in there for sure.
So number 9. What do you think? Force Awakens, maybe.
Force Awakens, yeah. Number 10, I think, is New Hope.
Okay.
Let's see, Revenge of the Sith after that.
Oh, we forgot about Revenge of the Sith.
I didn't forget about Revenge.
Yeah, okay. So Revenge of the Sith at number 11 then? Is that where we're at? Yeah.
Yeah, and then let's see. Sequels are done. Prequels
we've got
are done.
Empire. Yeah, we've got Empire and
Rogue One.
And Rogue One, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Empire, Rogue One. Well, I mean, Empire, second to last, and Rogue One, without a doubt, at the bottom. He could not believe Gary Whitta's gall for not including the Bothans. Just like the lack of Bothans. He was all about Bothan representation in this one.
I think I also heard he didn't like the inclusion of Darth Vader, and he wished.
Oh yeah, he's like Darth Vader being there, and it leads up to A New Hope, ruins A New Hope for me. That's why A New Hope, previously much higher, now further down because of Rogue One's existence, makes it far worse for Logan.
All right, I'm trying to figure out which one I'm missing here. There's Attack of the Clones. Yeah, so I missed what did we put after Empire of Dreams?
New Hope.
New Hope.
Was it New Hope?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wasn't Empire of Dreams was 8?
No, Empire of Dreams, and then it was Force Awakens. Force Awakens.
Yes. That's the one I'm missing here. Okay.
Yep.
Force Awakens there. So Empire of Dreams, Force Awakens, then A New Hope. Okay. So Logan's official rankings, officially official, are number 13, Rogue One. Number 12, The Empire Strikes Back. Number 11, Revenge of the Sith. Number 10, A New Hope. Number 9, The Force Awakens. Number 8, Empire of Dreams. Number 7, the most meh of movies ever, Return of the Jedi. Number 6, The Clone Wars. Number 5, Attack of the Clones. Number 4, Solo. Number 3, The Last Jedi. Number 2, The Rise of Skywalker. And number 1, The Phantom Menace, bringer of midichlorians. Thanks, Logan, for canceling your appearance on the show last minute. That's our revenge on you. All right, Cameron, hit me with your rankings, and we will get out of here.
Sounds good. I have food on the way, and I can do this in 10 minutes. Let's go. Number 14, Attack of the Clones. Number 13, any film in existence worth its weight in air.
Okay. I was wait a minute.
Every other film in existence, they're at number 13. 13 is also my favorite number, and like hell, I was going to give Attack of the Clones number 13.
Okay.
Let's see here. Number 12, Rise of Skywalker. Just like if you want to know my opinions about any of these films, like listen to the reviews. Like this is really like I'm really not in the mood to rehash. I'm very tired and very.
Yep.
Number 11, The Clone Wars. Number 10, Revenge of the Sith. Number 9, The Last Jedi. Number 8, Empire of Dreams. Number 7, Phantom Menace. Like I've said earlier, I'm hotter on Phantom Menace than a lot of people. I love Qui-Gon Jinn. I love pod racing. There's so much about that film that's great. It's just those gaps, those big gaps.
You love the politics. You love the Trade Federation.
I do love all the politics in the Trade Federation and everything about that. But it's the lull in between, like of these like 30-second scenes that don't matter, that are just really terrible. Then after that, it's Solo. I talked about it last week. I really love Solo. I think it's a really fun film. It's a space cowboy like romp starring Han Solo. Like what's not for me to love? I didn't say what's not to love because you guys definitely what's not to love about that film. But what's not for me to love? After that is Rogue One. I do have to come back around and say, like, you know, despite its Titanic length, and in what it covers, it does everything it does so well. And I can't help but be impressed by like just a lot of the the actors, the acting, the events that happen, everything happens, and like they just give time for things to breathe in a way that not a lot of films would have for such a momentum, like action-based film. For it to give these times for it to breathe is just what really makes, I think, that film special in a lot of ways.
Yeah, what was the word you said on that one that we got all hung up on?
I don't remember. I think it was like it was something. I didn't mean it in a negative way, but you guys are like,
yeah,
Cameron, it's this long ass movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's like burdensome or something like that.
You know.
No, maybe
laborious. Yeah, you
laborious.
said it was laborious.
Yeah, laborious.
Yeah.
Because it's a labor of a film. It's telling a lot of story in a tight time frame. But even then, that's still like a really long film.
Cam, I got what you meant when I felt like I could have jumped in. I wish I was listening on the MPs and I was like, oh, I got what you mean.
There you go.
Thank you, Christian. I know you always got my back. And that's when I will start now after Rogue One is The Force Awakens. I really love A Force Awakens. I think it pays great homage, and I think that it is perhaps the most beautifully shot of the films. I think that it just does. J.J. Abrams walked in there with a plan, executed it, I think, almost flawlessly. I just don't think as far as content-wise and story-wise, it matches up to the later films. But to me, it really, like, I can't get over some of like the most gorgeous shots that I saw in that film. Especially, and I'll never forget the shot of, and the entire sequence of on the bridge, Han and Ben, and the light from the sun going out. So it's like the world is getting so much darker and everything. And it's just like the way that it's all done is gorgeous. Just so unbelievably gorgeous. So I can't help but like really love that film for a lot of reasons. Next up is Return of the Jedi. It is the one that it used to be my favorite as a kid, not my favorite anymore. I still think that it's an absolute fantastic film. I love it to death. Second is Empire Strikes Back. I think categorically and like objectively, it's the best Star Wars film, but it's not my favorite. It's not the one that I consider the best. Or no, it's one I consider the best. It's not the one I consider my number one. And my number one is A New Hope. It all starts with A New Hope. A New Hope is just such a classic film for so many reasons. Watch our first episode when we talk about A New Hope. Hear what I have to say about it, because that is what you need to know if you want to know why I put it at number one. I love Star Wars so deeply with all my heart. It is such an intrinsic part of my DNA as a person, a nerd, as a writer, as a consumer of media, Star Wars is a cornerstone of who I am as a person. I know I don't flex it very often, but if I flexed how often I think about Star Wars, you guys would just think that I'm some gigantic Star Wars nerd, which I am. We discussed it. I told you guys about my obsession about the lightsaber forms as developed during the prequels, so like we don't have to get into that again.
Mm-hmm.
But like I will name them if I have to. But no, I love this franchise with so much of my heart. I just still get kind of disappointed when I think of how it ends, but at the same time, what an amazing journey to get there.
It's only the end for now.
For now.
Yeah.
There will be,
God knows they won't put a can on it, that's for sure. Disney.
There will be more Star Wars. It won't be in this saga or whatever, but there will be more Star Wars, of course.
There will be more Star Wars. Well, of course, The Mandalorian came out, and Mandalorian's amazing, so.
Yeah. All right. A solid list. Glad to see you and Christian both in there with A New Hope at the #1 spot. Cool. So extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. For the most part, it's a lot of what we've seen before, but the thing that jumps out is another documentary on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge: Adventure Awaits. And this is basically a documentary about the opening of Galaxy's Edge, aka Star Wars Land at Disneyland and Disney World. It's about an hour and a half. Has a handful of like celebrity guests that kind of like show up and got to kind of preview and see early Star Wars Land stuff. And so yeah, that's there for you. Then you have A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and The Mandalorian. And I will also, as I said earlier, I will throw out there behind the attraction Star Tours, specifically the Star Tours episode, because I think it makes a good companion piece for this documentary. Extracurriculars, what else you watching on Disney Plus? As I said, I sat down and watched that particular episode of Behind the Attraction yesterday, I think. And it's another good, like, that one's especially interesting because there's a hint of there's the history, so there's like Imagineers from when Star Tours kind of launched, as well as like, you know, footage of Lucas talking about it and kind of like collaborating with the Imagineers on the idea. But then there's also like the evolution of Star Tours over the years. So you do get stepping away from the original version of it and kind of all the magic that they put into that. You get the prequels are coming out, so they decide to reinvent the ride and come up with new alternate routes that you can take and do that stuff. And then they don't dive into the extra bit of like, well, now there's episode 7, 8, and 9, and they continued refreshing it, but that's kind of like implied. But then they also pivot into getting to design a Star Wars land after Disney buys Star Wars and Lucas and Star Wars outright. And so they do a little bit of that and talk about the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run ride, as well as the Rise of the Resistance ride. So go check that out. Also watching What If, which continues to be cool and interesting, you know, Marvel stories. And yeah, I think that's about it for me. Anybody else watching anything on Disney Plus?
I've just been watching What If too. I just got caught up on the first 2 episodes today. I fell behind by like 3 weeks because this is the 3rd week now, but I'm finally getting caught up and it's pretty good. Like, I feel like for me, it's the weakest of the shows so far. But I like the concept of the, like, What If, like, I love those books and I love that it's a show. And the 2nd episode I thought was really like pretty good. Like, that was definitely stronger than the 1st episode for me.
Yeah. Cool. Christian or Cameron, you watching anything?
Ted Lasso, which is not on here, so
yeah, fair enough. Christian,
I've been meaning to get to more of the docs on here, Mandalorian, and like you mentioned, the Star Wars and Star Wars Land and stuff. I haven't though, and I've actually been skipping on the What If. I'm sure I'll get to it eventually. I've personally thought the animation was cool. I know a lot of people were turned off by it, but personally, I think it looks really cool, and I love the as well. I think I just need a little Marvel break, just in general.
Yeah,
it's fair.
Yeah, like I loved everything they've been putting out. Like, I'm a big fan of Winter Soldier, WandaVision, Loki. I think I just wanted a little space before some of these movies start dropping.
Very fair indeed. Cool.
Yeah. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what's offerings. not like this was a good starting off. Oh, hey, this Star Wars was great. So time to check out some more.
Excellent. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, everybody, for joining me to talk about Empire of Dreams. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a massive shout out to nothing. I don't have anything to shout out. I just realized I was like, oh, I know. Yes, I do actually. Trevor's Let's Plays over at That Nerdy Site should be wrapping up the Hades stuff pretty soon, right? You're on episode 8 of that you're gonna be putting out.
So episode 6 went out today.
Gotcha.
Episodes 7 and 8 are going live this weekend, and then we will continue on if we need to pass that into next week.
Right on.
And I will just, yes, we need to get like it does go past 8 episodes, but not too much further past 8 episodes. So yes, you can go check that out, where each run of my time through Hades God Mode is its own individual Let's Play. So go check that out. Thank you for the shout out
Trevor
there,
God
Ken.
Mode, go check it out.
Indeed. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, we're kind of piggybacking off of Hades there. I wanted to give a shout out to our other podcast, That Nerdy Side Show. The most recent episode is you and Cam talking about some of the games you've been playing. So there was some conversation about Hades, and also Cam was talking about Boyfriend Dungeon, and also Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, which sounds great. So I just recommend people check that out. That's another fun episode.
Cool. Thank you. You can follow our guest, Christian Puente, at PixelBrave. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Christian? You doing anything out there? Just or you want to shout out anybody else out in the community?
Well, this is like, I mean, it feels weird. Like, I just want to shout y'all out for doing all y'all's work and letting me come hang out a bit. And it's you mentioned at the beginning that I had kind of a break because like just even before the pandemic, like I'd been kind of going through like some weird chi that I'm not gonna bring. I don't want to be a downer, so I won't talk on it too much. But just that, I really do appreciate getting to come chat with you guys. Part of my mental health journey was seeking a therapist, and I'd been having a lot of success with that. And recently we parted ways upon her recommendation. Hey, I think next step in your journey is like taking everything we've talked about and just like when you take the training wheels off, see what happens. Sometimes they crash and then you get back up again, or something. So we had our last session a while. I've been trying to stick to my word about I'm going to try to put it in practice with my own 2 feet, and part of that was wanting to start making things again and collaborating again. And like this is like hopefully one of the first of many more. It might be podcast appearances. It might be video productions or something like that. Like right now, like the easiest thing I could vlog into, like I, just check out my Twitter, and hopefully I'll be sharing little Twitter-sized vlogs about just random thoughts or things that I'm going about today. Yeah, so just and hopefully I said this long ago, when I left, That Nerdy Shy, was that I totally do it. Having fun with y'all, and I do need it. When things are opened up and safe again, I'll see each other in person for more good time.
Cool. Well, yes, we miss you very much, Christian. You are always welcome on the content. Anytime you want to reach out and join us for stuff, just let us know, and we will find a spot for you. But I'm glad
you always. I was just gonna say you always have a home here, Christian.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you're doing better. I'm glad the time away gave you kind of the journey you needed to kind of work some things out. So shout out to that, and taking care of yourself, taking care of mental health, always a good thing. As somebody, again, who has burnt out on stuff multiple times over the years and not listened to myself maybe when I needed to take that time off as soon as I should have, I applaud you for like having that recognition to say maybe you need to step away and kind of reevaluate some stuff. So shout out to that. And it's been great having you back on. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I think the last of the things I will give a shout out to is That News You Care About. This week, Logan and I talked about IGN finally put the Palestine aid article back up, but didn't really promote it. They kind of left it to the staff to promote things out and talk about, you know, the new resolution and the new changes that have kind of been worked on behind the scenes over the last few months. I think Logan was also kind of on the same page. Like, we were both kind of very negative on, like, this isn't a win. This was like the fact that it was 3 months later and like just happened as quietly as possible. We kind of talked about it in the middle of Gamescom, and we referred to it as basically a take the trash out with the news kind of stuff, a la The West Wing, or just political dropping news when it's going to get buried anyway. So that was disappointing. But then we also celebrated Able Gamers reaching their $1 million fundraising goal for this last year in honor of Steven Spawn's 40th birthday. So shout out to the great work that Able Gamers does over there, and you can go listen to the podcast on this week's That News You Care About. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site. Well, all of us except Christian, though you can find some Christian stuff over at That Nerdy Site. He'd given us some gems before he departed, but you can follow all the rest of us at That Nerdy Site, and you can follow, again, Christian at PixelBrave on Twitter. And once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always help support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite to help kind of keep the lights on, keep the podcast feeds paid for, all that good stuff. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, especially Christian, for joining us for this one. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed. And may the force be with you. And also with you.
Utini.
I love that. Yeah. Since I'm going to keep this bit in, peek behind the curtain, Cameron has said that, and also with you, every week of our Summer of Star Wars, and I have edited it out every week of our Summer of Star Wars. So
except the 1 week you couldn't.
I mean, I still could, but I let him have it this final go around. Oh yeah, I did leave it in when you said it on a That News You Care About randomly, because Logan also said the "May the Force be with you" line. So yes, it did sneak through in one of those episodes, but this was the first time we actually kept it in this episode. But thank you everybody for listening, and thank you everybody for joining me. This has been a fun saga. We will be back once again next week with, I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. It's going to be weird having to figure out what I need to talk about each week on this show again, but stay tuned, and thank you all.